because when most men, listen carefully, get in trouble, you know what we do? Isolate. And I told you, I love my wild shows, the animal kingdom. I love lions. What does the lion do? They roar so that they can separate one antelope from the pack. And once they've separated, they go in for the kill. 1 Peter 5 says Satan goes about as a roaring lion, roaring about your finances, roaring about that sex drive, roaring about that absentee father, so he can separate you from the pack. Then he seeks to destroy. So we want to, this is why these meetings are priceless. I kid you not. You blessed me. Just seeing your faces shows me I'm not in this alone. I'm not crazy. There are other brothers who haven't had things work out exactly the way they thought they would, and they're still digging. As men, we're called to be, if you're taking notes, king, prophet, and priest. King means leader. That means I initiate prayer in my wife. She doesn't drag me out of bed to church. I drag her out of bed to church. I drag my kids to church. I write the tithe check. I don't argue with her whether we can do it or not. I'm called to be leader. You know, it's funny. The word submit is like a curse word to women. But in the original language, it literally means to duck. In other words, you duck so that whatever's coming at you hits your husband. So we're called to be king. We're called to be prophet. That means we have a vision for our family. This is what the Joneses are about. This is what the Williams are about. You see, you're living in a tangible expression of this is what the Prices are about. We have a vision. It's clear. The Bible says in Proverbs 29:18, write the vision down, make it plain to see, so all that read, I'm sorry, that's Habakkuk 2:2. Write the vision down, make it plain to see. Write the vision down, make it plain to see, so that all who read it can run with it. Proverbs 29 talks about how without a vision, the people perish. Do you realize, and do I realize, that any aspect of my life right now that I don't have a vision for is perishing? If I don't have a vision for my retirement in 20 years, that my retirement's perishing. If I don't have a vision for how I'm going to stay married to my wife for the next 5 or 10 years, my marriage is perishing. If I don't have a vision for how I'm going to get in a career that's fulfilling, my career satisfaction is perishing. If I don't have a vision for my health and how I'm going to be around, I'm going to be an older dad. I'm going to be a first-time dad at 43. I need a vision for how I can stick around. If I just do BBQs and fried wings this and Lay's Fritos this and lime chips this, I don't have a vision for when she's going to be 22. So we're called to be king, we're called to be prophet, and we're called to be priest, which simply means that we initiate worship. We're the go-to guy. We open our Bible. We got the teaching tape. We're recommending the book. We're recommending the CD. We're recommending the ministry. Now, I said this topic of biblical masculinity because whether we want to admit it or not, most men listen to the radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me? I mean, let's just keep it real. When you're at church, you don't want to know theory. You want to know how do I translate this 90-minute investment into my challenges or my aspirations? And this is what we're going to look at right now, the biblical side, because like I said, so often I've been in a lot of meetings and you've heard husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church, and that is 100% true. That's the feminine side of the gospel. But the masculine side of the gospel says, and wives, respect your husbands. And when women aren't being challenged to the same degree to respect their husbands as men are being challenged to the same degree to show unconditional love, you have an imbalance. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. If I've spent weeks in this. If I ever come back, I got hours of stuff. If I get the opportunity to come back, I got hours of stuff I want to share to you about this because I watched this. So, without further ado, let me highlight some men in the Bible that I spent years studying. I have a 15-week teaching series on David. This is a sidebar, but I really want to encourage you, if you have disposable income, we have our teaching series out there. I asked my assistant, Ed May, to bring all of our teaching series that deal with men. Could you pass that to me? So I have 4. If you feel you're being blessed by what you're hearing today, I have 4 weeks on Daniel, 5 weeks on Nehemiah, 3 weeks on Joseph, 6 weeks on Solomon, 15 weeks on David. And you will see, as I outline some of these things, if something resonates with you from that Bible character's life, I want to challenge you and encourage you to get the teaching so that you can listen to it over and over again. This took me months, probably 18 months on some of these lessons combined during this series, and you can get it for, a small investment. I jokingly say it took me 18 months to write his rules, and people buy it for $20. So per hour invested, I'm making like 20 cents an hour on that investment. So what's my point? Books are the cheapest research assistants you can get, just like cassettes. If it took me 40 hours to prepare for it, and you can learn about it in 40 minutes, that's a good trade-off. So let's get started. Character number 1 in our discussion on biblical masculinity is David. The first point I want to make about David was, listen carefully, men. David, and you might want to write this down, was a good man in a bad place in a weak moment. When he cheated with Bathsheba, he was king. He had defeated Goliath. He was king of the northern and southern tribes. Saul has slain thousands, but David he was a good man, check it out, in a bad place because he should have been out to war instead of being a peeping Tom in a weak moment. Do you know that? That's all of us. That could be Chris Burge. That could be, I'm a good man. I believe I'm a good man. I believe I'm doing my best to follow the Lord. I've given him my life. But if I find myself in a bad place mentally, physically, in a weak moment, I move from an example to a warning. David was a man who suffered from a father wound because when Samuel came to anoint the king, he looked over David. And to me, it shows that he had somewhat of a strained relationship with his father to the degree that he showed all these other men. And he goes, well, do you have any other children? Oh, yeah, Dave, yeah, he's the one who tends the sheep. He's in the back. You want me to go get him? Now, you know what's ironic about this? David experienced the hurt of his father doing this to him, and he turned around and did it to his own sons. This is why we got to study these stories. David said in Psalm 51, in sin I was brought forth in iniquity. What do you think happened when he had the affair with Bathsheba? His life shows us just because you don't like what daddy's doing doesn't necessarily mean on your own you have the tools to change it. The fact that it bugged you, what you saw modeled, doesn't necessarily guarantee you're not going to repeat it unless you make a decision to change. You're an iniquity firewall. It may run in your family, but it stops when it gets to you. You're an iniquity firewall. David's life shows us that there's no amount of public success that can make up for being a failure at home. He's king. You don't get larger than what Dave was. But there's no amount of public success. Don't let the paycheck fool you. Don't let the cornered office fool you. Don't let the cute secretaries fool you. Don't let the European cars fool you. Don't let the gated community fool you. There's no amount of success, of public success, that can compensate for being a failure at home.